Okay, we're back in nicer attire, which is pretty nice. Not as frumpy looking. But I'm here to do part 3 of your opening of the key, Jay. Um, so we'll start it as we always do. The third operation. Sorry. The third operation is very similar to the second, in that it is an astrological based operation. It is the 12 signs as opposed to the 12 houses. So it's very similar. They're all governed by the same general ideas. This is more of a personal operation, I would say. It's technically, as I mentioned in the previous video, the signs are different from the houses in that the houses are more areas of life and the signs are more areas of one's personality. But, of course, since we're trying to figure out more specific event-based things, it's more just a way of organizing it, I think. Okay, so again, your significator is going to be the Knight of Discs. And we're going to invoke, as always. I invoke thee, E-A-O, that thou wilt send Heru, the great angel, who art set over the operations of this secret wisdom, that he may lay his hand invisibly upon these consecrated cards of art, and that thereby we may obtain true knowledge of hidden things, to the glory of thine ineffable name. Amen. Okay, give them a shuffle. And we are asking for the third operation of the opening of the key that we began on February 1st, excuse me. Sorry, I shuffled it a very long time. That'll be our last one. Okay. So we'll cut. And then deal them out as we did before. Of course, this is supposed to be a perfect circle, but clearly we're not going to get that with this table. Sorry. Okay. Almost done. Okay, so the same thing as before. I'm going to see if we can find your significator first. And if we can, within 2 tries, then we'll continue and I'll talk about the reading. Okay. Before let's see. I'm going to say, I think, I want to say, well, I'm going to want to try this pile. Okay, nope. Let's try this pile. No. Okay, technically I'm supposed to abandon the divination, but I'd like to give this one more shot. Let's try right here. And there you are. Okay. I guess within 3 tries we're still good. I mean, okay. There have been some where I've guessed, 8 times and still haven't found it. And that's when you really know. Okay, so let's talk about this. So each of these piles represents one of the 12 signs of the zodiac as opposed to the houses. And so they go in the same order. Technically some systems change it around and have different rules, but I prefer to make it much easier on myself and just say that this is always going to be Aries and so on and so forth around the ring. So the sign of Aries, again, represents your ego. It represents your sense of self. And here you have the 7 of Swords, which tells me, which reinforces this idea of, coming out of the second operation, we had kind of an array of good opportunity coming. And this returns us to the idea of kind of self-defeatism, I think, and this idea that it's futile to try. The sign of Taurus is your work ethic. It's your sense of industry and commitment. And you have the Knight of Cups. And again, this is interesting because the Knight of Cups was in the previous reading. This is one of the reasons I wanted to keep this trial because and not abandon it, because some of the cards are very reoccurring from your previous operations. And so we're building up patterns of consistency here. So you have the Knight of Cups in the same position associated with Taurus. So it's, this might, again, describe your significant other, whom you're particularly faithful to. The sign of Gemini is the sign that represents your intelligence, your, I guess, your sense of humor sometimes, but generally it's your intelligence and how you communicate with others. And here we have the Queen of Swords. So I think coming out of the second operation, we see you being a little bit more vocal about your needs, but again, not really knowing or having the confidence to be able to act on them, but certainly being more open about these things. It could also represent your intelligence taking on a more practical end or a more prudent end, taking on a more, I suppose, well, the Queen of Swords is someone who applies emotional sensitivity or intuition to their knowledge base and acts from both positions, or from both bases. So it could also be you taking some of this knowledge from the reading, or what you know to be true from your own hunches and how you feel about the whole thing. And it can be you starting to apply that to the way you think about this situation. Your Cancer is the sign of your private emotions, your sort of your vulnerable places, I would say, but also that which you are kind of hiding and keeping, not on purpose, but really just it's your interior emotional life. And you have the Four of Wands, and I think this shows a sense of, I guess, coming to fruition, or a sense of accomplishment inside, or a sense of greater security. Again, coming out of the second operation, feeling like things are a little better, a little more secure. But then in the sign of Leo, we have the Nine of Swords, and Leo is the sign of one's creativity and one's passion. Don't mind my cat behind me. But Leo is also the sign of one's independence and leadership skills, and their love life to some extent, and their real passionate love life. And you have the Nine of Swords, which means that, again, it's sort of, what do you want, cat? It's returning to this theme of the longer you put a pause button on the situation, the more it's going to bother you, and agitate you. No, I don't want you right now. Go away. Go away. No, I don't need help from Kofi. As much as Kofi thinks he wants to help. Sorry, I go through life talking to my cats. Pretty bad. Your sixth sign, the sign of Virgo, I think it's how we mature, how we grow. It is, again, a sign associated with our health. But it's also our practical knowledge, our practical wisdom, and our sort of like street sense, our economy, and that sort of thing. And you have the Universe, which, no, go away, sorry. Pain in the butt. Okay, the Universe, which means that I think the Universe is often associated with these slow, very long periods of time. And it again reinforces the idea that the situation is going to grow and develop very slowly. And that it's going to, it also kind of takes on this serious kind of tone because the Universe is Saturn. But I don't know. I think it also can represent the crux of the situation or the synthesis of the situation itself. And so it might be telling you that one of the places we need to work on for you is pragmatism and practicality in general. Then we have your seventh sign, which is the sign of Libra. And you have the Ten of Discs, which Libra is the sign that represents our sense of fairness, our sense of equality and justice, and also our sense of balance. And it represents, again, I think having to, you've got the Ten of Discs, which represents wealth or just money in general. And it means having to balance these things out. Sort of like balancing your checkbook to some extent, but on a bigger scale. Your the sign of Scorpio for you, which is the sign of sex, death, and rock and roll, sort of, but mystery and kind of just generally sex and death, basically. Pretty cool, right? You have the Prince of Wands, which looks like this, which may represent, again, with coming out of the second operation, ending with the Sun. There's a desire for liberty here and greater freedom of exploration, and it may have to do with letting go of those parts of yourself that were holding you back that we talked about in the first operation. But of course, none of these piles are as relevant as the first pile, but I'm just going through them anyway. The next sign is Sagittarius. You have the Four of Swords. And Sagittarius represents one's personal philosophy, one's sense of spirituality. And you have the Four of Swords, and the Four of Swords is, again, like putting a pause button on something. It's like putting a hold on something, trying to put a bandage over something and hope that it holds, that sort of thing. So it's, again, kind of maybe a reluctance to trust your intuition, or just a break from spirituality. Maybe taking a break from things that are more metaphysical and focusing more on the physical, the here and now, as opposed to the eternal. And next we have Capricorn, your personal sense of industry, your sense of personal accomplishments, and you have the Six of Wands, which is very nice, which is a card of success and victory. So it does say that you might, start to, by opening up some of this energy that you're keeping contained in yourself and in your private life, you might be able to channel it into other areas related to work, and therefore open greater paths of success for yourself, and maybe garner for yourself greater recognition for your abilities. Then you have, for Aquarius, the Three of Swords. And Aquarius is the sign that represents our personal hopes and aspirations and our goals. And you have the Three of Swords, and the Three of Swords is the Lord of Sorrow, which is sort of an odd goal to have. So it may, it also reflects, I think, this kind of general depression about things to come, which, goes back to the second operation, certainly. It's sort of encapsulating that whole thing, I would say, and just saying, feeling depressed about the future and feeling closed off from it. Then lastly, the sign of Pisces, your subconscious, and more your fears as opposed to your hopes, but also what your intuition is telling you. You have the Ten of Swords. And so there's this fear of ending, the fear of real collapse, I think. And again, this gets back to, the fact that you are you're very much attached to where you are, and whether it's good for you to be there or not. And I think your intuition may be nudging at you that you need to really be okay with taking greater risks, but you're afraid to do that. I think in the second operation we saw that you took a risk out of necessity to maybe have a confrontation with your significant other, which of course has not necessarily happened yet. I'm talking about it in the past just because it's the operation that's behind us, but it is technically yet to come. But this tells us that you're very afraid of damaging that and damaging anything. You kind of want to keep everything very very well organized and easy, and you want to avoid any struggles or further confrontations. So again, you are here in the Aries pile with the Seven of Swords, and we'll just clean these other piles or signs up. So now we will read as we always do. Spread them on out. And you are here, and again you have the moon with you. You have the moon and art. This time the moon is not quite as strong, but it's corrupted by its issue with art. You have water and fire, and they're canceling out, in other words. So it's again, I think it's this idea that you start off in this operation maybe feeling like things just aren't working quite as well between you and perhaps your significant other, that you're not quite jiving together as well because of these confrontations. Conceivably, it can also just represent that you're going to be very uncertain about how to make the situation work yourself, and that there's going to be this sense of confusion about, I suppose, putting the pieces of the puzzle together. It's going to seem like the puzzle isn't going to want to fit, that there's going to be like a blockage that's going to make it seem harder than it is. 2, 3, 4. This is going to be a very difficult moment that is definitely going to not be easy. It's going to be a little harsh, and this time around, a sense of success is less certain. I think in the previous operation, at the end of it, you kind of regained a sense of independence and a sense of what you can that it's okay for you to have separate needs and wants and goals. And here it's kind of like as you try to assert those, it's going to raise certain problems. There's also this big sense of, it can't work, that it's kind of pointless to really try. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Again, it's reinforced yet again that it's just you're not going to be able to move. In some aspects, you're paralyzed by it, or you're just very vacillating on the subject. It's kind of like part of you really wants to, exert yourself, or not exert yourself, but assert is the word I wanted. Assert yourself more, and it's interesting. I think you want it to be where you can both assert yourself and work together with your significant other. But overall, it's going to feel very much like you can't do that. Either they're going to put up blocks and say no go, or you're just going to feel that you can't for whatever reason. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. But you will actually, I think, be able to make it work. I think it's sort of saying you're going to get more worried about it than you need to be, because eventually we do come to a sort of reconciliation here. I think that some of that sense of futility is going to diminish, and might not become as, or rather might grow less overwhelming. And so you might be able to reach a compromise, actually. That's what I'm seeing with art being reinforced. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. From there we get the devil, who is surrounded by the 5 of Wands and the moon. So the moon and the 5 of Wands are antagonistic, so they're ill-aspected, and the devil is, kind of just okay there. And of course the devil is not a card that we need to necessarily freak out about. It's certainly got its positive aspects as well as its negatives, like all of them do. It's it's unfair to select it as, the major bad card of the deck. But anywho, I think coming from that, what's interesting about that is that, coming from that sort of reconciliation, there's still this sense of, I guess, self-accomplishment that needs to be acknowledged, the sense of independence. The devil is an incredibly independent character, and he's not really keen on compromising. So this could represent conceivably not even you, it could represent the other person in this situation who may be very stubborn about the whole thing and could start to get kind of not, I don't know, I want to say that he's kind of just generally upset about the whole thing, and he thinks that it's kind of getting in his way to some extent. I don't know, or it could be you trying to maintain your sense of independence. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and then we hit the Seven of Swords again. So it comes down back to that sense of futility. So this is another kind of cyclical operation in which we don't really get very far. The second operation, I think we actually had a good sense of going somewhere, and now we are kind of backpedaling. So again, I think this is going back to what we were talking about before, about how the situation is going to take a long time and is a part of personal growth for you. When I was talking about the universe in the sign of Virgo before, about how this is going to be full of growing pains, I think. But it is kind of there's a gravity to this situation. I just want to pair them as we're supposed to do. Okay, the moon and art. Technically, these are ill-aspected. So this is definitely along these lines of, gosh, I guess that being uncertain of whether or not you can actually forge a compromise or whether or not you even work well together. It's just that's where we start. Because the moon represents uncertainty about a lot of things and general fear about the unknown. And in this case, it's ill-aspected, so it's very exaggerated and not in its best light. Whereas art is also negatively aspected, and art tends to represent the fusion of opposites, the cooperation of opposites, and the harmonious integration of opposites into a functioning whole. And here we have that not working out quite the way it wants to. It's sort of like forcing oil and water to mix, and they don't really like mixing. So they mix a little bit, but it's not really as pure a compound as one would like. And eventually they may separate again. Okay, so it's the same sort of thing here, that there's this general, there's this great anxiety and difficulty surrounding working together again. Having a hard time with that. The devil and futility. Well, the devil, negatively aspected, represents someone who is overambitious and very determined to do something the way that they're going to do it, and it's not necessarily healthy or particularly sensitive to others, and so he's definitely coming off as kind of a jerk here. And in this case, I think, I don't think that it's you in this case, because we've talked about how dedicated you are to this relationship throughout all of these operations, and so it wouldn't make sense for you to suddenly change that attitude so quickly. granted, at the end of the second operation, we talked about you kind of coming more into your own and having kind of reclaimed some boundaries. But here we have, the devil as someone, the other person being very difficult to deal with, I think. Or conceivably, it can also just represent, I think, it can also allude to that lack of confidence. But I don't know, this sort of doubt in you, doubt in your own abilities again. I know that this is getting kind of redundant. The opening of the key sometimes does get a little redundant because the same themes don't necessarily get resolved, and so they continue throughout. But this is characterized a little bit differently than we've seen it before. The devil definitely represents material industry and productivity, an ability to create for oneself success. And we have it paired with the Seven of Swords, which represents a sense of not being able to do that. So, of course, this isn't exactly colored in a great light either. But if I were to see it as, given the context of the rest of the operation, I would see it as, one of you being very stubborn about the whole thing and not exactly easy to work with. Okay. And so we result in, I think we return to this conflict issue. And it may even be a conflict within yourself more than it is an external thing. This is sort of going back to the second operation, but we have the Five of Wands and the Seven of Wands, which both speak to conflict. The Five is more general competition, but the Seven is about really trying to make a stand for oneself and defend oneself. So it could be, it could be that. And again, this might not even have to do with your relationship. This could also have to do with, I assumed that it did coming out of Operation 2, but, because we're in the pile that represents Aries, and so it represents your sense of independence and your sense of self and your ego, this could have other connotations as well, having to do more with work and career. This could be, difficulty just in regards to your career, making either fitting in somehow or maybe even fitting yourself into that. Because, of course, this whole reading is about discontent that you have with your job and your general situation. And so, again, this is sort of just, this pairing especially talks about this concern about, again, making all these puzzle pieces fit together into a coherent whole. And as a result, not really trusting yourself with the situation. The Devil is a card that's very similar to the idea of Aries, and so he's not particularly strong here. He's very weakened, and so he's pretty ineffective. But he's ineffective because either I think it's because you're telling yourself again that that you can't. And as a result, it translates into greater struggle, I think. Just that, gosh, I don't know, just competition again. And it could either be in the workplace or in your relationship. I mean, if I were to talk about the counting again, yeah, I just want to review it for myself. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Yeah, there's definitely this idea of trying to compromise through difficulty and finding that difficult. I mean, that's basically what the conclusion of this really is. And because you're unable to compromise, it becomes something that you turn inwards on yourself, and it gives you less freedom again. So again, we're backpedaling in the third operation away from what we had accomplished or seemingly accomplished at the end of the second. Okay, so now this was a long one, I realize. We're going to do the fourth operation and then the fifth operations. Thank you very much, and I hope, excuse me, again, another hiccup before the end of the video. I'll see you for operation 4. Bye-bye.